So today I'm going to be fixing the fuck up for my absolute idiot mechanic, which was me. I installed the wrong flywheel into this and it's gonna destroy my whole engine. I can't outrun it. Which means I'm going to be dropping my transfer case and my transmission, pulling the bell housing back off, and removing the flywheel. I'm gonna get my old flywheel resurfaced at a machine shop and then install it. So today I'm going to do the teardown, and I guess I'll bring you with me. So the first thing I'm going to do is disconnect the battery, and then I'm going to jack her up. So I'm going to do most of this off camera, but I'll keep you with me. All right, now I'm under her, and the next step is to drain the fluids from the transfer case, which is going to be through this plug right here, which uses a 30mm socket. And from the transmission itself, which is this plug right here. And for that, I'm gonna use this big ass adjustable wrench. If I can get it in focus here. And that will be perfect. And since I just filled these with brand new fluid, I'm going to recover the fluid into this bucket, which I just cleaned and dried and made sure there's no water in it. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And I'll see you in a bit. All right, now that those are drained, I can use a 12mm socket to remove the drivetrain here. This is the front drive. And back here, almost forgot. On these drive shafts here, I did mark one side with whatever I had on hand. In this case was some pipe thread compound, and that way I can install it the same way that it came out. All right, back to it. Okay, now that I got the bolts disconnected, what I can do is push the drive shaft up back into the transfer case, and then I'll allow it to disengage from right here. And that doesn't want to push, so what I'm going to use is this right here, this very long Prybar, and get it up in here and just kind of push it gently towards the transfer case, and that will break it free. And now that it's out, I can just pull it straight out of the transfer case. As for this front one, it's disconnected, but I didn't remove it from over there, and I'm not going to. So what I'm going to end up doing is using a piece of rope to tie it down to this little support beam right here. Right here. The next step is to remove this cross member. You can see I already got it disconnected from the catalytic converter. I probably should have reconnected that, but I didn't. So I got these two bolts over here, and then there's two of them up inside these holes right here. There's nuts holding on the bolts on the top. And then I got these two nuts and washers right here. And after that, I can remove these two, which hold these transmission support. And before I do that, I'm gonna put a jack right about here, maybe here, under the transmission to keep that up and keep the engine from getting, too tweaked. Oh, I should mention I'm going to use 15mm deep sockets to get in here and hold the nuts, and then I'll use a 15mm wrench on the top to hold the top of the bolt. And that's how I will get that out. I've now got the jack stand in place holding up the transmission. So I'm going to remove the cross member next, and I'm going to start with this side because the frame will keep it supported, and this side right here is just going to fall down as soon as I get those bolts off. I'll actually remove these ones first, and then I'll go to the actual cross member. All right, I got these two disconnected. These ones disconnected, and I'm about to remove these. But before I remove those, what I'm going to do is support the transfer case with my actual jack, not a jack stand. That way it'll be ready to pull out as soon as I remove the 5 bolts. One right here, 2 on this side, one up at the top, and then 2 on the other side over here. so I can't get a good picture of from this angle. At this point, organization is key, so I put all the cross member nuts and bolts in a bag with a piece of paper saying cross member. Now, as you can see, I accidentally have my piece of wood holding up the cross member. So what I'm going to do is move the jack over just slightly, and then I'm going to have to jack up on the transfer case, which will allow me to get the cross member out of those bolts there. And then I'll just be able to drop it and slide it out. And so as I'm lifting up the jack, you can see those bolts are just sliding out of the cross member. And there she goes. And now I can just pull her out. All right, now that the cross member's out, what I'm gonna do is disconnect the four-wheel drive shifter right there. I'm gonna put a prybar up here between the metal plate and this and pry it back. And then there's the vacuum hoses right here. Right there, maybe if it'll focus, right there. And then over on this other side, I gotta follow this. And that is the speedometer. And that just unscrews. So I'm gonna do all those next. And then it is the transmission support block. I'm gonna remove that. And then the 5 bolts. All right, so that top one up there is gonna be a real challenge to get to. So what I'm gonna end up using is a wrench instead of my ratchet driver. And I might have to drop the jack down a little bit so that I have a little more clearance. Now everything is being supported by the transmission and the bell housing on this front cross member, the actual engine frame. Well, frame, car frame, whatever. All right, so I gotta get to that one next. All right, so this is something to be aware of. As I was loosening the transfer case, because the transfer case and the transmission share ATF, is chirping out here. And I was gonna try to save this ATF, but I don't know if you can see it, but it's really cloudy, which means there's probably water still inside the transfer case and transmission from when I power washed it. I tried to be careful, but you know, shit happens. So I'm gonna get a gallon of ATF to refill these. And it shouldn't take quite that much, but it should be about 20 bucks. Hopefully I don't need to replace this gasket. I just changed it. And I got some RTV if it rips when I take it off. All right. This is how you know I'm not a professional mechanic, because a professional mechanic would wear gloves the entire time. All right, now my transfer case is unbolted and being supported by the jack with a piece of wood. And I got these screws to keep it kind of stable on there. So what I'm gonna do is pull straight back to disconnect the input shaft of the transfer case from the output shaft of the transmission. And then I can angle or tilt, or whatever, rotate, that's the word I'm looking for, rotate the transfer case this way so that the output shaft here doesn't hit on this cross member back here. And then I can drop that, and then I can remove the transmission itself. All right, so I pulled it back and I rotated it, and I can rotate it a little more maybe. And now I should just be able to drop it very slowly and carefully. See if I can get this up somewhere where it's not gonna fall. I don't think I'm gonna be able to record this, but maybe. Let's see, it's coming down. I'm just gonna let it come down really slow on its own. Oh, cool, the gasket came off. It looks good still. Just hold this as it's coming down, make sure it's not hitting anything. Looks good, there's clearance. All right, and my transfer case is out. Got little faster. Cool. Oh, here's a vacuum line that's on the top. I gotta remove this line, pull it off. Can't do it one-handed. Okay. All right, that's off. And that means my transfer case is completely out. So I'm gonna let it down, and then I'm gonna work on the transmission. To do that, I'm gonna jack up the back with the actual jack. Get rid of the jack stand because it's kind of, well, it's not really in the way. Maybe I'll leave it. But getting rid of it now is probably fine. And then there's 4 bolts. You can see one of them right in the center of the screen. And there's one above it, and then 2 on the other side. And that will remove the transmission from the bell housing. And then I can finally remove the starter and the clutch slave cylinder right there, which is that black nipple looking thing, and drop the transmission. Oh yeah, this is important. Before I can drop the transmission, I actually need to remove the shifters. And to do that, I had to remove this whole housing here, which was 2 screws on either sides. And that contains a couple wires that plug into the bottom here. And those wires just slide right onto the PCB. It's kind of something neat. I've never seen that before. But these just kind of rotate off. And clearly, I popped the rubber off of this on accident. Looks like it takes a lot of rotations. Alright, that's the 4-wheel drive shift. And then the main shifter. Yeah, sorry about the mess and the cigarette butts. I gotta quit smoking. I'm probably never gonna quit smoking though. Let's see, it won't focus. Doesn't matter, I'm just twisting it counterclockwise. This whole thing will pop right off. And then I can show you underneath. All right, so now that that's off, I can disconnect these from the PCB by just pulling them right out. Just like that. See, this just slides right onto that PCB. You got the copper traces right on it. The first one powers it, and the second one goes to a board. This board right here on the shift lever itself. Okay, and now I'm gonna pull these off and spill my cigarette ashes all over the place. And then what I have to do is lift this rubber up over the main shift lever. Okay. And you can see there's a couple bolts here. There's 4 of them. There's gonna be one right there, and then one up on the top corner here. And I gotta remove this before there's enough clearance to actually drop the transmission out. I don't have to remove the 4-wheel drive shift lever, although it's not supposed to just wiggle like this. It should need to be, the button should be pushed inside here that allows it to shift, and it looks like I kind of broke it maybe. Anyway, once I get these bolts out, this still won't want to come off because there is a gasket underneath that is made from this stuff right here. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that off camera. And yeah, one thing I should mention is Originally, when I had to take this off, I had to drop the transmission halfway in order to remove a bolt from right in there. I don't know if you can see it very well. It's right above my fingernail. And that allowed me to remove this plastic assembly, which blocks access to this bolt. So without removing this, you can't get to this. So I had to drop it halfway, remove that. Then I could slide this out, and then I could push it all back up, and then I could remove this bolt. And this is just gonna pop. This is the clip, retaining clip is just gonna pop off, but there's a hole in there, so I'm gonna have to get a screwdriver and apply just a little bit of leverage. Just for reference, these bolts are 13 millimeter. So the shift lever is off. Well, one thing I do want to do is actually put the transmission into 5th gear. Not yet, but when I'm reinstalling it, having it in 5th gear will allow me to rotate the output shaft so I can align the splines of the input shaft with the splines on the clutch pad. Alright, so I've run into a slightly sticky situation. I've got this jack here holding up the transmission, and luckily my transmission is extremely light. With a heavy one, I would not recommend doing what I'm about to do. What I'm going to have to do is either I put blocks of wood right here, and then I can lift the back of the transmission and then pull the jack out. And what I'm going to end up doing is letting the transmission just hang, which is going to tilt my entire motor forward. And if it were heavier, it would break the firewall and probably destroy the engine mounts. Or what I think I'm going to try to do here is put the jack under the oil pan right there and jack up the front of the engine, and hopefully that's enough for me to get this jack out. This is what I ended up doing. Just put a few 2x4s on top, and I was able to just drop the jack stand. And now I'm ready to remove the transmission from the bell housing and then pull it back. Although I do want the jack itself right about here on this area, and that'll keep it from falling. I want it on the center of balance. All right, so as you can see, I've moved the jack over. Focus, please. There we go. And I got it right about where I want it. So now I can begin to remove these bolts over here. And these ones have heads on the inside of them. I can use a, what do they call it? Torx wrench, I think. And on this one in this corner at the very top, you can kind of see it there. I'm gonna have to use one of those wrenches because I can't get a socket over that head because there's not enough clearance due to the transmission itself. That's how I got it out, and that's how I got it back in. Okay, I've got the bolts all loosened. They're still in there, but they're loose now. So what I'm gonna do before I fully take them out is remove this plug right here, which is the reverse light switch. And that's basically the only thing that actually plugs into the transmission. Normally this right here is bolted on to the top where my finger is. It's hard to see, it's not wanting to focus. Let's see if I can get this up there. Yeah, right about there I think is where it bolts on. But my plan was just to zip tie this down to the clutched hydraulic line right here because, you know, it's not really going anywhere. It's not about to fall down and start scraping on the road if it popped out. So I don't think there's any real reason to put it back up there except to make my life more difficult if I ever have to do this again. Because the first time that this retaining clip here was still bolted in when the transmission dropped and I didn't have it centered, and the whole transmission was hanging off the reverse line. So yeah, that's not good, and that would be kind of a pain in the ass to rewire that. So All right, I'm gonna get these bolts out and remove the transmission. All right, you can see I've got these bolts out. One here, one up there. And then on this side, if it focuses, right there and at the top there. So the next step is to pull the transmission back. However, there's this four-wheel drive shift knob that doesn't want to come off all the way. It doesn't, right there. So what I have to do is slowly lower it while pulling it back. And it's going to tilt the whole engine, but eventually it'll slide out. So I'm gonna do that now. All right, so the transmission doesn't want to let go of the bell housing right here. So what I'm gonna do is use this little Prybar tool thingy and get it up in that crack there, right here, and just kind of pry it off. As long as I do it slowly and evenly, it should be okay. I don't want to force anything. I just want to get a little bit of pressure back there. All right, wish me luck. All right, well that did not want to come loose. So I ended up grabbing my actual pry bar and I was able to rotate the transmission so that it was kind of like this, and I managed to get it up in between there. And that pry bar with jiggling on the back end here allowed it to come free. So now I just gotta pull it all the way out and drop it. And then I'm at the bell housing, which I can finally remove. Again, I'll have to remove the starter over here, which is behind that bulge right there. And this clutch slave cylinder, which actually pushes on the clutch fork, and that allows it to work. So I'll be back in a minute. All right, and this is my transmission on the ground. There is the meat and potatoes. I gotta remove that flywheel behind all that. Now I hope I can get to the bolts at the top right there before I had to actually lift the cab on the driver's side about an inch or two, just so I can get to those bolts. All right, I'm gonna get this out of here and put the transmission in the garage. All right, now so for the bell housing, I've got 18mm bolts. I'm gonna take off that one, and then there's 1, 2, 3. I think there's 5 in total. Maybe there's 6, 4. Let's see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, there's 6 in total. But before I do that, I have to come back here and remove these 2 bolts right there and there from the starter. And then after I do that, there's these little teensy tiny bolts on the bell maintenance hatch, which is right here. I can't see that though, but they're really tiny. I think they're 11mm, but they could be 12s. And it looks like I forgot to install one over here, but there's one here, and then one here, and then one up in here. So there's 2 on the right side of the driver's side, and one right above the starter. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And I still have to remove this slave cylinder right here. And then I can get back up in there. And I think I'm gonna throw out this new throw-out bearing, because it's plastic and my old one was metal and it still turns relatively well. So I think I'll just use the old one. And I'm gonna go ahead and stop this recording and start another one with the flashlight on, so I can get a good look inside here and see if there's any damage. You know, honestly, it looks all right. The teeth on the clutch look fine. There's a little bit of wear on the front from when I was getting the transmission installed back in there, but as long as the bulk of the teeth are good, it's probably fine. Alright, so I'm gonna go ahead and get this bell housing off, and this one right here is what concerns me. As you can see, the cab is kind of blocking it. So yeah, I'm gonna have to jack up the side of my vehicle, which means removing 2 at least of these right here. These mounts hold the cab onto the frame. So I'm gonna remove that one, and then the one in the back right there, if it focuses ever, right there. All right, so I'm gonna get that done. Again, these are 18mm bolts, and then I believe these ones are gonna be 15s. I can check that real quick while I'm here. Let's see. This is my 15. Yeah, that's a 15. So I'll do that first, and then I'll lift the cab up using my jack and some of the 2x4s out in my yard here, and get the bell housing out. All right, so the bell maintenance hatch is disconnected right here. I was wrong, those are 10mm. And I can get this to just kind of drop here. I can't fully remove it yet though, because the starter has things that still extend inside of the bell housing. Okay, but looking at the back of this flywheel, so far it doesn't look terrible. I don't think the teeth are damaged, which means hopefully I can turn it. It doesn't want to focus, but all right, well, I'm gonna get the front pulled off, and I'll be able to inspect it. So this slave cylinder here, what it does is it pushes a thing on the fork right here, which pulls or pushes this throw out bearing right here against the pressure plate right there. And what that ends up doing is actually pulling the clutch pad off of the flywheel, in case anyone's wondering. And it turns out these are 13mm. Right, here is my bell housing. And that fork doesn't look like this. Yeah, that's fine. So this slides on this wall like that. And I'm getting rid of this. I don't like the plastic. I mean, who wants plastic in their car, huh? That's weird. Looks like a little bit of grease through up in there. The pilot bearing bushing looks okay. No, actually that backed out a little bit. I'm gonna have to hammer that back in. Okay. So these bolts here that hold on the pressure plate are 13mm. And now I don't have any kind of special tool to hold the flywheel in place. So what I can do, I'm gonna take a look at that starter. It looks okay, it looks a little bit worn, but nothing's broken. All the teeth on the flywheel are fine. So what I can do is I can put a Prybar with, I believe it's a 19, it could be an 18mm socket on the front of the crank pulley, and wait till that Prybar hits part of the frame and it'll stop rotation. Or I can use my pneumatic drill impact driver to remove these, and that's what I'm gonna have to do for the flywheel itself, because those ones are just a pain in the ass. So, all right, let me get this off, and then I can whip out the air compressor and the pneumatic impact driver and take the flywheel off. And let me make sure that this... Yeah, see, I don't see any markings on the flywheel itself that says which direction it's supposed to go. I'm almost positive that this is correct because this side of the actual clutch sticks out further, and that almost always goes towards the gearbox or transmission. So, all right, I'm gonna get this pressure plate off. There we go. So there's my flywheel, there's the new clutch. Looks fine. I got a little snot on it. I'm gonna have to clean it up before I reinstall it. And you know, honestly, this flywheel looks fine. It will be fine for someone else. Unfortunately, I can't use it, and I can't believe the pilot bearing backed out. That shouldn't happen. That's so weird. Okay, anyway. Or bushing, it's a bushing, not a bearing. All right, I'm gonna pull that out with the pneumatic impact driver, and then I will be done for the day because machine shops aren't open today. So I'm gonna have to wait till tomorrow at the least till I can get my old flywheel resurfaced. And hopefully they can do it, because I can't find another one that will fit my vehicle. It's because it's weighted, people don't make it anymore. All right, and this is the job completed. Here is the flywheel. Back looks good. It was a little stuck on here. It looks like this bushing here started backing out too. So I'm gonna hammer both those back in with the soft mallet. And that's almost guaranteed because this is the wrong flywheel and this vehicle needs one with a weight. Oh. Well, that's it for today. In case anyone's wondering, here's my Harbor Freight impact driver. And here's what it sounds like. Sounds pretty awesome, huh? Alright. That's it.